Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 99 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with Melissa Pierce for this episode. Melissa is a widowed parent and an author, and she is a self-care advocate. And the really fun thing for me is she is from Oregon, Portland, Eastern Oregon, and now the Oregon coast. So, and I used to live in Portland and have spent a lot of time on the Oregon coast, so that was kind of a fun connection there. She has two sons, and her older son really struggled as a teen. So be sure to listen for that part of our discussion if you're facing a similar situation and how he needed some additional resources beyond what could be provided locally, and how she was able to get him some resources and help. And she talks also a lot about that in her book. So if that's a topic that's relevant, you might want to learn more about her experiences there. We covered lots of other ground. We talk about self-care. She's got a new subscription box, actually, for widows, either to buy for themselves or for someone who might want to be looking for a gift for someone who's widowed. So have a listen for that. And actually, she set up a special discount code for my listeners at her website, and the discount is Widowed Parent, and you get 10% off. It's not an affiliate code, it's just a discount for you. So if you're interested, be sure and check that out. Okay, I hope you enjoy my discussion with Melissa Pierce. Support for this podcast comes from BetterHelp. You can talk with a licensed professional therapist online, anytime, anywhere. Visit betterhelp.com/widowedparent to learn more and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/widowedparent. I hope you'll check it out. My guest today is Melissa Pierce. Melissa is a widowed parent and is the author of Filled with Gold. She's joining us today from Manzanita, Oregon. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jenny.
Yeah, well, I've really been looking forward to speaking with you. And I have to say, now, I'm guessing that most of my listeners may not have heard of Manzanita, Oregon. But I have. And I actually, it's on the Oregon coast. And my grandmother had a house in Arch Cape, Oregon, which I think is just down the road from you. And I grew up going there all the time. Yeah, and we'd go to Manzanita, to the little teeny tiny public golf course there to learn how to play golf. So I think it's terrific. I don't very often hear people from right there. So this is cool.
Right. Yeah, it's a gorgeous place to quarantine because it's only about an hour and a half away from Portland, Oregon. So
right.
And which is where I'm from. So yeah, it's a nice place to do this. Yeah.
Well, and the funny thing is too, as I was reading your book, I'm not from Portland, but we lived there for about 5 years. So things that you were talking about and other parts of Oregon and Bend and different Portland things. I was like, oh, I know these things. So.
Right. Yeah. I think in the book I was mentioning different restaurants, which kind of pock and different places that we journeyed. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, cool. Good. Well, and the other thing is I really I always like speaking to other widowed parents, and I think that it's something I hear from listeners a lot that they feel alone, and maybe they don't know anybody in their neighborhood or their kids' school circles or whatever who's younger and widowed, still has kids and teenagers at home. And so I think that talking with other widowed parents, especially I know you're a little bit farther out from your loss, and so hearing about your journey, your stories, your reflections and all that, I think is really a terrific way to share. And I hope that people can, learn and what am I trying to say? Feel a little less alone, I guess, by hearing about, your story.
Yeah, because I didn't know anyone at that time. I was 44 with 2 kids, 10 and 13, when Dave died, and so I felt like I was the only one, and I didn't find a ton of resources. I was always looking for books or groups or meetup groups, anything. Podcasts weren't a big thing back in 2011 when Dave died. So I love now.
2011.
Yeah,
Okay, so 10 years. 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was 10 years January. And if there was a podcast, I didn't know about it. But nowadays, like, you have a podcast, there's lots of great resources out there for widowed women and widowed parents. But back then I was like, how do I find this stuff?
Yeah.
Like, what do I do? It was rough. Yeah.
I hear you. Yeah. I mean, it was 5 years ago for me, and I felt the same way initially. What I found out is once I started looking, there were resources and there were things, but I had to hunt around. And so that's why I think, pulling them together in a show like this and talking to people like yourself is helpful. So, and the other thing, and, I know we'll get to this, but I think you have some unique experiences, particularly regarding your older son after his dad died and some of the extra support that he needed. And sometimes our kids do need more help than a peer grief group can provide. So I'm looking forward to talking with you about that as well and some of those resources. Because I think that, for people listening, some kids are going to need more support than others. And I think talking about it and hearing from other people is hopefully helpful.
Yeah. I mean, you really have to parent the kid that you have. Like, I have two sons, and I parented my youngest differently than I parented my oldest during that time because there was different needs there.
Yeah. Right.
And, I was in over my head, but I really had to get to a point where I just had to trust myself.
Yeah.
And trust my gut in the decisions I was making.
Right. Okay, so let's get to all that in a moment. But first, I want people to meet you. And so let's hear a little bit can you tell us about your life and your family before everything changed, before your husband died?
Yeah, I'd love to. In 2005, my husband Dave and I, prior to that, we were experiencing some fertility issues. And, we wanted a family. So we're like, let's get a family, or let's have a family, whatever that looks like. So we decided to adopt older children from Oregon foster care system. And that whole process, just the process of, adopting kids through that system and figuring out, like, what kind of parent do I want to be? What kind of parent Dave is going to be? Kind of all these questions you have to ask yourself, all the background checks. It was really kind of an intense time. Trainings, we went through a lot of trainings, and we ended up meeting our kids for the first time in 2005. So we have two boys. They were 5 and 7 at the time, and they're brothers, and they were pretty much in and out of foster care their whole youth. So there was a lot of challenges there, but Dave and I felt like we were ready. We were trained. He was a school teacher, so he kind of knew. He was like all things kid. He was all used to that. He was really comfortable with that. I struggled a little bit with mothering, and because all of a sudden on a Sunday afternoon, meet my kids and we go to Chuck E. Cheese, and boom, I'm a mom. So that was
of a 5 and a 7-year-old who were walking, talking, have opinions, and
exactly. So it's like, wow, how did this happen?
Yeah. And you were living in Portland at the time, right?
Yeah, we were living in Portland at the time. So we lived in Portland for about 2.5 years and decided to move to the eastern part of the state in a town called La Grande. And Dave had an opportunity to teach K-12 music there. And he grew up in Eastern Oregon. And so we thought, well, let's just raise our kids in a small community. Let's see what that's like. Because there were some challenges, with our kids. And we kind of just wanted to be on top of it. And Dave was on campus with the boys. And, he was their band teacher. There ended up being the math teacher. Part-time math teacher there too, with budget cuts, and football coach, baseball coach. So it's like our lives revolved around the four of us and these two kids. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. When you say small town, can you tell us what you're talking about?
So La Grande is small to me because I grew up in Portland. And then I think there's maybe 15,000 people there. And then we went to Dave taught in a school, and the boys were in school about 10 miles away in a little town called Union, which was maybe 2,000 population.
Okay.
So it was really culture shock for me, for sure.
Yeah.
But it was, we lived on the side of a mountain, lots of snow. Like, I was a city girl, in this country area, small town. Lovely people, but it just wasn't really good for me. It was really isolating for me. But it did give us a chance to be together, which was because there's trade-offs, there's trade-offs in everything. I was kind of isolated, working from home, and Dave and the boys would go off to school and I'd be alone a lot. So that was not super helpful for me, even though I was working.
Yeah. And so how long was that going on, that situation, before everything changed?
About 3 years we were living in the Grand.
Okay.
And then, things were pretty kind of idyllic, like baseball games, basketball games, choir concerts, all this stuff kind of revolved around the boys and all playing in the snow and all that stuff. And it would just really gave us an opportunity for the four of us to really, really bond as a family, because we were a new family. We were kind of a young family, new family. Things were kind of on this really cool, even keel. And then just one Friday night, Dave and I and our youngest went out to pizza with this other family, and my oldest was in Portland on a field trip. And we got back from having pizza, and Dave, he's like, yeah, I just don't feel that good. I feel like I'm coming down with like a chest cold. My chest feels kind of tight. I'm like, oh, well, here's some Mucinex and, night, take care of yourself. And then the next morning I found him and he was dead. Wow. And I guess I didn't understand. Like, I saw his leg was kind of gray out of the covers. And, I was like, you wake up and, things did not look right. And then I did CPR but he was cold, and called 911. And that night there was a big ice snowstorm. And so it took the paramedics like an hour to get there. Wow. So it was just me and my youngest at the home. And it was just, I have clear memories of certain things, and I have really foggy memories because it was such a shock. And then I just didn't really believe that he died for probably a good 6 months. Like, I didn't really believe that it had happened. I would have to remind myself, like, did that happen? Like, maybe he's on a fishing trip, or, maybe, like I had these moments where it's like, that didn't happen. I'm in this weird alternate universe. But yeah, it was a huge traumatic shock for all of us.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your younger son was home with you, but your older son was away. So I'm telling him that must have been difficult, tricky,
that was horrible,
complicated.
Yeah. I'd called my brother to go, send my brother to go pick him up. And then I called the teacher that was like on the field trip with him, and I told him what had happened and that he needed to get my son. And normally I can tell this just like no big deal, but telling my oldest over the phone that what had happened, and then just hearing him in distress and cry, and it was horrible.
Yeah, and across the state from you, where you couldn't.
Yeah, it's 250 miles away, but I didn't want, people were starting to know, because we were supposed to be at a basketball game. Dave was coaching, and I had to call, this is what happened, we're not going to be there. And so in a small, I didn't want texts. I didn't want him to get a text or anything like that. I needed to let him know. And so then my brother and his family showed up, and they grabbed him, and then they drove to us. So that was a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, and it's an important point you make, the importance of hearing it directly from you, and figuring out the challenging circumstances to make that happen so you could be the one to tell them.
Yeah. I didn't want my brother to do it. I wanted him to be there, to
Right.
just scoop him up and,
Right.
hold him in his arms and bring him to me. But that was awful. Yeah.
Right. So after he died, well, I noticed you mentioned in the book that all the people who know these things, the grief literature and stuff, says don't make any major decisions in the first year. But you made some pretty big changes even right away, right? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I mentioned we were living on the side of a mountain, and it was really difficult. Like if there was any kind of snowstorm or ice storm, it was really difficult to get in and out of there. And I just did not thrive there. So, and actually the house was up for sale.
You guys had already decided to get off the mountain.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was already on the market. And I was talking to two of my friends, my male friends, and they're like, we can't help you up here. The community needs to help you. We want to help you. We can't help you up here. You're 10 miles away. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I'm moving. So it was, I think 2 days after Dave's funeral service, we just everybody packed everything up. The whole town showed up, this line of, pickup trucks a mile long, and they moved our house in 3 hours.
Wow.
And moved it down into, 10 miles away into the town where the boys were going to school and where Dave taught. And,
the 2,000 person town.
Yes. Yeah. And just complete strangers rallying around us, and just how that community just took us in their arms and took care of us for 6 months until I made the decision to move back to Portland, because that's where my family, that's where I'm from, that's where I'm comfortable. So it was a tough decision.
Your job was in Portland too.
Yeah, my job was there. The actual physical office was there, and they were really cool they actually paid to move us back. I mean, they were really supportive. Nice. But yeah, they allowed me to work remote when, we made the decision to move to Eastern Oregon. So it was really supportive company. And so, yeah, all the folks, like my colleagues, I really had a lot of support, whether I wanted it or not.
Yeah. Well, and I think you mentioned in the book, maybe it was in the acknowledgments or somewhere, about you thanked the town of Union for really supporting you guys. And can you talk a little bit about like what that meant to you, or what, I don't know if you have any tips for, other people who might be supporting someone like your family, what you learned, or what you could share with them?
Yeah, it was, they were devastated too. I mean, Dave was part of that community. He was the football coach. He was the math and music teacher, baseball coach. He was just somebody who got things done. He would see a problem or see something that needed help, and he would just, okay, let's get this done. Let's do this. And so he had that kind of energy. And it was something that community appreciated and really needed. And so when he died, I think they channeled all of their grief and sorrow into we're taking care of Melissa and the boys, their life is going to be easier. We're going to do all the things that, all the casseroles, all the food. They would take me on walks, get me out of the house, take care of my kids, carpool my kids. Because I was working full-time. I was back full-time back then. And so I couldn't always, go to the baseball game or take them. I'd show up later. So Dave was in the midst of revamping a kind of an abandoned track to make a baseball field. And so all of the dads in the community, on the weekends, they would just donate their time and their resources, and there's an athletic field named after him. They continued the project. So it was kind of a way for them to channel their grief and sorrow too. So it was amazing. I've never seen or been a part of anything like that before.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a really good example of what's called instrumental grieving, and men in particular tend to be more likely to be instrumental grievers, but to channel their grief into doing something tangible, like in the memory of the person they lost, in their name, as and doing those tangible things, and helps them with their own grief.
Yeah.
Which
I've never heard that term, instrumental grieving. I like it.
Yeah, actually, there's a fascinating book. It's called Grieving Beyond Gender. And it's one of the first books that I read because actually the kids' grief therapist who was coming to our house for the kids, not for me, happened to say to me one time, I think you might be an instrumental griever. And I'm like, what's an instrumental griever? Like, never heard of it, right? So I went to Amazon and I typed it in and I found this book and it's fascinating. I think you might find it interesting. Anyway, I'll put a link in the show notes if anybody, it goes through like intuitive grievers and instrumental grievers, and women tend to be intuitive grievers, men tend to be instrumental grievers, but there is crossover.
Right.
And it's quite interesting. Anyway.
I think I am instrumental because I'm a doer. I'm like, problem, solve it.
Yeah.
You know, like next, let's do this. So that's one of the reasons I mentioned this is after reading your book, I was getting the sense that you might be more that direction. You and I had a lot of things in common as I was reading the book. I was like, and that. So, did it freeze up? Can you hear me?
Oh, now I can, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's my internet. It said it was unstable. Gosh darn it. Okay.
No worries. No, we're good. Hey, everyone is working from home and at school from home these days. Yeah. So, you know, and as we said, you're on the Oregon coast, so...
it's a little spotty here.
Well, you know, it can be spotty here too, and I'm in the suburbs, so, you know. Yeah. Anyway, no, it's all good. I had mentioned, and I'm not sure if it came through or not, I got the sense as I was reading your book that I think you and I have a lot in common, and I wondered if you might be an instrumental griever, so I mentioned the book because I think you might be interested. Which reminds me, actually, you mentioned in your book that you really like reading grief books. And I was wondering if there's a couple that you know you would recommend you found particularly interesting or useful that listeners might like to know about.
Yeah, one that was given to me was I'm Grieving As Fast as I Can. It's kind of an older book. Some of it's a little outdated, you know, some of the language, but it was really helpful to just understand kind of the younger, like out of order death. Like this is not supposed to happen, you know, when somebody's 46 and healthy.
Right.
Or 44, I'm 44 and two young kids.
And how old were your boys, by the way, when he died?
They were 10 and 13 at the time.
Okay.
Widows Wear Stilettos, I thought was kind of a little cheeky, but also it spoke to me because it wasn't super heavy. Like I couldn't take in a lot of heavy material at that time. You know, like just only so much information could come through. So that was helpful because that was written by a younger widow with a child. But again, there wasn't a ton. I mean, there's some great books now. Your book, Future Widow, Melissa Gould's book, Widowish.
Right.
There's so many, you know, people are really writing about their experience. Women, widows. So
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I'll put those books that you mentioned in the show notes in case people want to check those out. Okay. So as far as those changes right away, you moved into town immediately, and then 6 months later, you moved back across the state to Portland. And I think that when you went back to Portland, you ended up connecting with the Dougie Center. Can you tell us about that?
I did. Yes. So when I was back in Eastern Oregon, I was Googling everything I could, and so Dougie Center was like one of the first things that resources that came up for helping kids, you know, and understanding grief as well. So I took my kids to the Dougie Center, and at that time it wasn't in the new building, but it was just a really cool place for my kids to get some grief support, and me, because you take your kids there, the kids, it's like a, you know, peer support group, they play, and then the parents go off into another room, and so there's kind of this other support aspect. And so it was cool to connect with other folks who were going through kind of a similar experience, because I just felt so alone. I felt like I really was the only one at that time that I didn't really have anybody to talk to about this. So they went to Dougie Center. They didn't find it so, like, I think we went for, I don't know, a couple months, and they were like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to force you. But that's how I ended up getting, or finding my grief counselor, was through the Dougie Center, through a recommendation through them. And then I was on my journey of therapy.
Well, and actually, okay, so I'm glad you mentioned this because you said something interesting in the book that I wanted to ask about. You said that the grief therapy that you started actually ended up kind of dipping in and out of personal development therapy as well. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I went in with just like, okay, help me, give me a guidebook, give me the A to Z. How do I move through this? How do I move my kids through this? Give me the homework.
You're like, and I'll have it done by next week, and you 100%, and I'll be done with this, right?
Yeah, and I want this over, and tell me when this is going to be over. And so she just laughed, or she kind of like, this is not how this works. That's cute and all. So really, it was like I'd never been in therapy before. I'd never really had to dig into. First it was like, grief, help me understand like all my crazy feelings that are going on, and why am I thinking that this didn't really happen, like it's kind of a dream. And so it was really nice to be able to kind of understand grieving and what I was moving through and what my kids were moving through. And then it kind of morphed into basically personal development, like what does Melissa want now? Life is not like I imagined it would be. Like Dave and I had all these dreams and hopes together, and I had that for myself as well. And then when he died, all that went down the toilet, and so I had like no idea what the future was going to be like, and who I was in that. Like I was now mom and dad. I was both parents, and sometimes not doing that great of a job, and sometimes not talking very kindly to myself, and sometimes soothing myself with, unhealthy habits like, over drinking. And, so I just really had to take a look at all that stuff, because I knew I didn't want to feel like crap all the time. I didn't want to beat myself up so much, because I really had to come to a point where I had to take care of myself, because I was not doing a good job, and I was not able to take care of my kids in the way that I wanted to take care of them. So, and that had to start with me. That had to,
Yeah. Well, and I noticed, and I love this, you called it your Becoming Melissa project.
Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you bring into your adult life, like all your childhood stuff, all your, coping skills. And I was very much a pleaser. I was very much somebody who didn't really speak up that much. Like I was very much somebody who's like, yeah, everything's cool, even when it's not, and so like, I can't do that anymore. It's not cool. Everything's not great. I need help. And help is not something that I really, being vulnerable was really hard for me. And so I had to do those hard things. I had to be vulnerable. I had to admit that I don't got this, I need to, I really needed, it was more of like a nurturing myself. I really had to, I didn't have somebody to have my back anymore. Like Dave had my back. I don't have that anymore. I need to do that for myself. I need to kind of love myself through this whole thing. And so I gave myself permission to do that, Yeah. Like with the over drinking, I talked to my brother who's in recovery. I'm like, hey, Mike, I'm doing this. This is not good. You need to keep an eye on me. And I need help. And so, because everybody was like, Melissa's so strong. She's got this. I'm so proud of her. And look at what you're doing. And I'm like, I am failing. Like, I am not doing well. But apparently that's how I projected my outer self. And because I was always like that. Yeah, nothing bothers me. Everything's cool. It's like, it's not. I'm falling apart. And then my family's falling apart. And I will not let this happen. So it was like a big screeching of the brakes. Like, hey, we got to change things up.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you were able to find a therapist who could tackle the grief part with you, and also not just limited to that, but could, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, move with you as you started to like consider this personal development, all the other aspects of because it's, it's about grief, but it's also about life, right? Like, and the who am I and what do I want and what am I doing and where am I now and who am I now?
Yeah. And all that just went down the toilet. So now it was like, who am I now? Like, what do I want? What do I want now? I'm not in partnership anymore. So what do I want? What do I want for my kids? And really putting myself first, which is not something I ever did. That was not what I did before. So it was kind of like Melissa 101. Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes sometimes widows, I think, worry or wonder or are afraid or whatever. What if they change, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, grow, develop, become someone different in some senses? And what if there's someone that their husband wouldn't recognize or wouldn't want to be with anymore, or what if they grow past, what that person, what am I trying to say? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely had those, I have those feelings. It's like, I'm a different person than I was before. I mean, you can't help it. Like, you just can't. I'm a different person than I was before Dave died and who I am now. It was a traumatic experience and devastating to lose him. But it was like, it sounds so cliche, but I kind of found myself. Like, I was able to like ask myself, like, what do I need now? I think I need a nap. What do I need now? I think I need a bath. What do I need now? I need someone to hug me. So I was like really doing like all this self-talk, and I don't even know if it was really my grief counselor. I think she kind of gave me the permission slip to delve into self-care and all that, and just like do what makes you feel good. You need to feel good. You really need, even if it's 5 minutes, you need to, what makes you feel good? And so I was like, what does make me feel good? What? I never asked myself that before. Yeah. So just kind of, she gave me the permission slip and I ran with it.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. And I think, I know one of the things you talked about in your book, it was also, I think, this growing and figuring out who you were would come to be valuable as your son started to struggle more, right? Can you tell us about, because now you were the only parent alive trying to figure out how to help your son. Yeah. So, how old was he? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my kids were 10 and 13 when Dave died, and I think it was about a year, that whole first year, I think we were just in such shock that we were just trying to, everything just seemed kind of like this weird, breezy dream. And then, after the shock wore off and we're back in Portland, and my oldest had started high school. I mean, that's hard. And he was really struggling with his feelings around Dave's death and just everything. He grew up in foster care, so there's just a lot of trauma that happens there, like stuff I don't know about. And it was really scary. Like, he was just not able to manage his emotions, and and then he was also like shut down, and all the video games, just hours and hours, just a lot of anger, which it made sense. It's like, of course you're pissed, of course you have all these feelings, but comes a time where it's like, okay, then you're not able to manage this. It's kind of unhealthy. I mean, it is unhealthy for you, and it's unhealthy for the people around you and the people that love you, and did lots and lots of work, with him. And then it came to a point where I had to make a decision. I just couldn't not do anything because it was getting kind of scary. And, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, so before it got to that point, I mean, you found a therapist for him.
And he just didn't engage,
Okay. Okay.
Just not engaging. It's like it was kind of part of an agreement I made with the school, or
Okay.
that we made with the school, that he would do this. And the school was incredibly supportive. They knew our story, but they also were like, we can't,
Yeah.
we have 900 other kids here. We can't, give him special dispensation on his activities and stuff. So, yeah, it was, I can't remember. I kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No, you're good. So the therapist wasn't really working out. He wasn't really into that. And then a lot of anger was coming out, and,
Right.
and you were thinking you need to do something.
Yeah, the therapist, great person, one of the top recommended therapists in Portland, working with young men. And we were working with him, a lot. And I remember getting the call. He had called me. I was in the grocery store, and of course I'm like, oh yeah, I need to grab this.
Yeah.
This must be important. And he was like, you need to come in. We need to talk about this, because this is not working. He's just really shut down, and I really can't help you guys. And
Ooh, wait, the therapist called and said, I can't help your kid.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
And I was like, I just remember like crying in the Safeway grocery store, and just abandoning leaving my cart, going out to my car. And, so we made an arrangement to meet up later that week. And he just told me, he's like, he's really, really shut down. It's kind of scary. And I'm like, I just remember crying, like, if this was your kid, what would you do?
Yeah.
And so then he gave me, here's what you could do. It's going to cost a lot of money, but, contact this company called Educational Connections in Portland, and they're consultants. And I just had, at that point, I was doing so much trusting of my gut. It's like, okay, I was asking for help from, I'm spiritual, and I still believe Dave is present. So I was like, hey, you need to help me parent this kid. You need to parent our kid. And so whatever book, whatever people you can put in front of me, whatever, I was just like trusting that the universe was going to put it all in my path and answer my plea. And, and that's what happened.
Yeah. So the therapist is, okay, I want to ask about this, because I think, there are families and parents who are like, okay, my kid needs more help than the grief center is providing. My kid needs more help than an outpatient therapist can provide. And sometimes it's really hard to know where to turn and what to do next. So tell us about, you called it Educational Connections. Can you tell us, who are they? What do they do? What's their role in this picture?
They were able to assess our situation by interviewing the school, interviewing his therapist, adults in our lives, me. And they never met with my oldest, but they had a pretty good picture of what was going on. And then they came up with several recommendations. And those recommendations, then it was upon me to either take them or not, or, do what I needed to do. And so I ended up making a lot of calls and interviewing the folks that they recommended. And then I made a decision, and I sent him to a 13-week, I think it ended up being 15 weeks, wilderness therapy in Central Oregon, in the middle of probably one of the coldest winters that we have ever had. And it's wilderness. They're not in shelters. They are, it's hardcore.
For people who might be thinking Oregon sounds like rain, they might be thinking of Western Oregon. You're talking about the snowy, cold, barren part of Oregon.
Yes. Yeah. It was like a bad winter. But with wilderness therapy, it's just a way to okay, let's short circuit what's going on here, create a break, and so that the therapist there can kind of, do some of their work. But it was hell, because I was so worried about him. I would check the temperature on my phone every day. And but I was in direct contact, just a ton of contact with them. And then I made the decision to send him to a longer term therapeutic boarding school in Nebraska called Boys Town. And yeah, and it was just one of the best decisions I've made. He may not think so. I mean, I think he's, you know, he's 23 now, you know, and you know, we talk about it every once in a while. It was not ideal for him, I'm sure. It was scary, and there's all kinds of feelings around that. But I knew that like he couldn't go into his adulthood with the behaviors that he was exhibiting. It was just not healthy. And the therapist, his therapist, I called him after I'd done all this, after I'd sent him to Wilderness and told him what I had done. He's like, Melissa, you may not think it right now, but you saved his life. And so I was like, okay, I think I did it. You know, there's so much, you know, to it. He was in, like, for about a year and a half, 2 years, we were moving through this experience. And so it was really rough. And my youngest, it was really hard on him. And, but here we are, you know, 10 years later. I'm glad I did what I did. You know, it was pretty drastic, but I'm like, my kid's suffering.
Yeah.
I can't not do anything.
Well, and so I'm wondering how much you know, before this came up, before you had to start calling wilderness camps and doing that stuff, you had this personal development focused time, this therapy, the grief therapy, the personal development. You mentioned you were growing as a person. I guess I imagine was that helpful in helping you, like, have the strength to make some of these difficult decisions?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have done it without, you know, nurturing myself, bolstering myself up, you know, giving myself, you know, putting myself first. It sounds kind of like not intuitive, but it is really intuitive, because I'm the only one running the ship. I'm the one working, paying the bills, taking care of my kids, feeding them. And if I go down, this whole thing goes down. So it was really a come to Jesus moment for me. It's like, I have got to put myself first, and I'm not going to feel bad about it.
Yeah.
You know, and if somebody thinks what I'm doing is indulgent, they are not walking in my shoes.
Right.
So yeah, I did a lot of self-care, just a lot of body work, because like the grief was just stuck in my body. That's what it felt like for me. So I had to move it out, move through it, like let it process, you know, all my feelings, sadness, overwhelm, loneliness. You know, I just had to feel them, because I just was kind of in a point where it's like, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel bad, so I'm not going to do that. But you have to, because all those feelings bubble up. It was kind of what my son was doing. He was not feeling, he was not acknowledging, and he was stuffing until it just had to burst out. And so I'm like, I don't want to get to that point. I want to really process all this. And at that point, I really trusted myself. I really, for the first time in my life, I really felt like I truly trusted myself and my intuition and my gut. You know, like, I made all decisions. I did not make decisions from my head in a sense. I did, like, did this feel right? Did this feel good? Yes, I'm going to do that. Does this give me tingles or goosebumps? Yes, I'm going to do this. It was just a really powerful kind of place to be in. And I think I needed to be in that place to advocate for my kid.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I'm thinking about a practical question, switching back to so you called Educational Connections, and they said, hey, you should send your kid to wilderness camp in Central Oregon. Do you just say, hey, kid, I have a great idea. Let's go to wilderness camp? Like, how does that happen?
Well, I would give him clues and hints, like, hey, if you're not going to work through this with the resources that are being given to you, then I might need to make some different decisions about how we're going to handle this. And it might be that you're not going to be living here while you're working through this. And so I would, and he'd be like, sure. And so so I gave him little clues about that, but he needed help. He really did, and we needed help as a family. And so I did not give him like, hey, tomorrow morning, this is what's going to happen. It was based on the recommendations from the women at Educational Connections. They're like, you don't need to drive him to where he's going. Like that's not good. So they let me. They gave me recommendations of people who transport kids to. Yeah, and so I remember one of them's name was Leo, and that's my dad's name. And so I'm like, okay, maybe this is a sign. This is what I should be doing. And so I worked with them, and they handled it very beautifully and safely.
Tell us about that. Can you tell how does this happen? Like,
we had arranged that that they would wake my oldest up in like 4 a.m. because kind of your defenses are down, when you're sleeping and you're waking up, you're not like full on engaged with the world. And so I was there with them, and they told me kind of, here's a couple things you should say, which was like, wake up. These are these 2 gentlemen, and they're going to take you to Central Oregon, and we're going to get you some help there, and they're going to talk to me on your whole trip, and I am here, just basically boom, boom, boom. And then I remember he woke up and he looked at these guys and he put the blankets back over his head. and the Leo, the gentleman, goes, Brad, you're going to need to remove the blankets over your head. And he put his hand out. It's like, hi, I'm Leo. Nice to meet you. This is what we're going to do. And why don't you get up, go to the bathroom, and we'll be on our way. And it was just kind of one of these things like, and he's like, Mom, you can leave now. And so I had arranged it that my brother and his family, they lived very close. I'm like, and they knew what was going down. So they had the pot of coffee on for me, and I went over there, and so people knew what was going down. And people in my support system were very, very worried about me and my kids and what was going on. Yeah. But I also was not into any of their opinions either. It was like, I know what I need to do. I will accept the consequences of what happens, but I'm really tapping into my gut, and this feels like the thing that I need to be doing. Right. So kind of tuned everybody out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for telling us about the transportation aspect, because I think that's a really practical question. People are like, okay, well, you're finally convinced, all right, I should send my kid to this thing, but if I get them in the car, maybe they're going to hop out on the way there and run away, or get there and refuse to go, or who knows what, something that might not, go well.
Yeah, and these gals at Educational Connections, gals are professionals, but every step of the way, they were with us, like through the whole 2 years. They were on calls, weekly calls, and so they were there for us, and it was just really nice to not feel so alone in that.
Yeah. And then so is it pretty common that after something like a wilderness camp, you mentioned that's like to kind of shock the situation and to kind of change things up, and then is it pretty common to go to some kind of residential therapeutic placement then after that?
Yeah, that's really common. I think most kids that go to wilderness end up going to a longer term like therapeutic situation. And so when I think it was Boys Town, and there was another some kind of a ranch or something, Discovery Ranch, I think it was. And I just really decided that Boys Town was the best fit. I visited, I talked with the people. I knew the family that he was going to live with. There's no fences, they can come and go if they want, and it was just, it's almost like a little town. They have their own fire department. And his summer job was working with the fire department. So it's really like
that's cool.
This whole sense of community, like, hey, you're part of the community. Right. And so be a good person in this community and learn these skills, cognitive behavioral therapy skills. Like, we're going to give you the tools so that you can have tools in your tool belt to manage all these, situations that life will throw at you. And it was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, and do they call it therapeutic living?
I don't even know if they call it therapeutic living. It's just, I don't know. It's just Boys Town. I don't remember, but it's a boarding school for sure. Like,
okay.
And it's 24/7. They live with the family. All the teachers, everybody is engaged with the kid, and they know what each kid is working through. And so, like, all the coaches, all the family teachers, which is who they call the folks that they live with, they all are just aware of each kid's situation, and just you have all eyes on you. It was really pretty amazing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that sometime. Yeah. It sounds like a good option, for certain kids in certain situations, and I think it's good for parents to know about some of these options and resources and things that you maybe don't hear about all the time, to know that there is stuff out there that may be helpful for our kids. Yeah. So how long did he stay at Boys Town?
He was there for 15 months. So he ended up graduating high school there, because there's a high school. They have their own police department. It's really funny. I mean, it's a beautiful campus. So he ended up graduating high school there, and he ended up getting a full scholarship to college.
Wow.
Because he lived there in Nebraska, and through like Warren Buffett's foundation, because he's from Nebraska, he offers up the opportunity for high school seniors to get full tuition if they meet certain criteria and they go to a Nebraska university. And so he qualified for that, and he's graduating this year. So he's graduating college with a business.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah. That's terrific. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's been a long road to get to this point.
Oh yeah. Yes. It was long, very long road, but I'm glad I made that decision. It was the best decision I've made. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for telling us about this, because I imagine it can't be easy to share and talk about. And I know you talk about it in your book as well, which I think if people are, want to learn more about your experience with it, is a great place to go. So thank you. I want to shift gears slightly before we run out of time. I don't know how we're doing here. We'll probably run out of time soon. But in terms of now, you've got a number of things going on in your personal and professional life. So first of all, you've remarried.
Yes. I remarried in 2015. It was about 4.5 years after Dave died. And, part of, my personal development through all this is like really asking myself questions like, what do I need? What do I want? What do I want my future to look like? What do I want my kids' future to look like? And part of that is partnership, because I love partnership. I love being in partnership. I thrive in it, and it's also a really good way to learn about myself and somebody else. So I didn't really know, like, dating in your 40s is kind of funky, but I got really clear about what I wanted in dating and in a future potential partner. And it's almost like I wrote a catalog order or something. I was like, I had certain, it wasn't like in my 20s, it's like, hey, you're cute, let's have a relationship. This is like, I had to be really, really thoughtful and clear about what I wanted, because I have kids, and this is a big deal. So I got super clear, wrote out a list of some deal breakers, some were not, of what I wanted in partnership, and I met Sean. I put the list away in my desk and just kind of forgot about it, and then I met him after I wrote that list, probably 4 or 5 months later. And it's kind of crazy. And like after we would go on dates and stuff, I would pull the list out and I'd check off things like, wow, check. Oh man, it's not the best speller. I can I can let that one go. But I would, and like he would hit all these marks. I'm like, wow, like did I really order this up? This is crazy. And so Sean, he's a great guy. He's he's taken on like the father role for my youngest, because my youngest is really open to that. And so he kind of takes on that father energy for him. And my oldest respects him. And, it's our families get along really well. Our moms are good friends, and they go, walking, every week. And it's been what I wanted, what I deserved. Like I knew what I deserved now, and this is what I wanted. And I wasn't going to settle for not having what I wanted. And whether I ended up not being in partnership, that was okay too. But it's like, this is what I want. I deserve this. I want to go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's terrific. And I think one of the things, if I'm remembering correctly, that was on your list, you wanted somebody who wasn't going to feel weird or threatened or something about the fact that you had a dead husband.
Yeah, I think like number one was like, must respect my relationship with Dave, because he is. It was funny, like early on, I didn't really want to talk about Dave when I was dating Sean, and he's like, well, tell me about him, like tell me a story. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to sully what we have going on right now, and he's like, no. And so he'd really encourage me to talk about him, and I talk about him every day. I've got pictures of him in our home. He's my kid's father. He is my husband who died. I have a husband in this life, and I have two husbands, kind of. And Sean is like somebody who is confident in his own person, that he really, and he just is so supportive. He's supportive of what I'm doing, writing the book, of my new career with the subscription boxes for widows. He's just so like supportive and open and wants to help. And that's what I wanted. That was like a deal breaker.
Yeah.
If you couldn't handle the fact that I have a husband who died and this other life, then he's not for me.
Yeah. That's terrific. I love the fact that he is that way, and that you recognize the importance of that. That was important to you, and you weren't going to compromise on that.
Yeah. It was uncomfortable at first, just for me, not for him. It was funny, not for Sean, because and I remember telling some stories, and he looked at me, he's like, I think we would have been friends. Like Dave and I, I'm like, yeah, I think you would have.
Huh.
Like, I think you would have liked each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, you mentioned subscription boxes. Can you so what's that all about? Can you tell us about that? Yeah,
so just with all the self-care I was doing and how that really changed my life, the big game changer there, it's just something I practice and preach all the time. You have to take care of yourself. I do it now, and that's what changed things for me. And so then I wrote my book, and there's a lot of kind of my journey in self-care, like doing whatever made me feel good, whether that was tap dancing or massages or meditation, and anything like that would make me feel good. So that kind of led me to create a monthly subscription box for widows, supporting them with their self-care, because I think the minute that you do start taking care of yourself and putting yourself first, this is this, it's so overwhelming and stressful, like just a way to manage the stress of all this. Having this box show up on your doorstep, where you have these kind of a permission slip to take some time out for yourself, whether that's to read, a book that's in the box, or one of the lotion items. There's a lot of body care items, activities, books, just things to just make widows feel more connected and not so alone. Like, this is something that I wanted to show up on my doorstep. Here's my permission slip to, go upstairs in the bathroom and take a bath. While the kids are downstairs, fighting or playing video games or whatever. And they always knew not to knock on the bathroom door. I think I scared them or something. They just knew, like, the bathroom door was shut. Do not bother mom. So, yeah, just this, it's what I wanted to show up every month and just give myself that ability to take care of myself.
That's cool. That's cool. So is this something that is available now? Is it something that people can, like, is it a gift thing? Is it a self-purchase thing? Like, tell us more about how it works.
Yeah, I launched it last month, and I'm sending out the first boxes right after this podcast interview.
Congratulations. That's exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. And I would say half the folks that ordered it are people giving gifts to their widowed loved ones, which was kind of really cool. I never thought about that aspect. But so half the folks have purchased it for themselves or widows because they recognize that, yes, I need to take care of myself and I would like this. And then it gives an opportunity for, oftentimes if people don't know what to do, they'll give, food or flowers or plants or whatever. And even like after, like, I don't know if this happened with you, but people go back to their lives. After that initial devastating shock, everything kind of goes back to quote unquote normal, but like I was left feeling like, well, I'm still hurting, where is everybody? So so this was a good way for the gift giver to just provide an ongoing gift. Like it's a one-time purchase, or there's a subscription, 3, 6, and 12 months. So
terrific.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we'll make sure to put the. Is it a website, or where is it available? Yeah,
my website is www.filledwithgold.org, and so they can just go to the website and order it there.
Okay, good. All right, I'll put that in the show notes for sure then. Good. Okay. Gosh, I think we could keep talking about this all day, but I do think we need to wrap it up here. So I'd like to ask just one wrap-up question, if you don't mind. I ask all my guests this, actually. Yeah. If you could say one thing to newly widowed parents, what would you say to them?
It's such a difficult and challenging and devastating time, so you really have to go easy on yourself. Like, you're doing the best you can. Keep telling yourself that, because you are. And if it feels so overwhelming, ask for help, because people do want to help. So yeah, definitely ask for help.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Melissa Pierce, author of Filled with Gold. And so, Melissa, where can listeners find you, find your book, find your boxes, and everything if they'd like to learn more about your work and connect with you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is www.filledwithgold.org.
Okay, terrific. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Melissa Pierce as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 99. And a quick reminder, Melissa has set up that discount code for listeners of the podcast. The code is widowedparent, all one word, and it's for 10% off your subscription. And this is just a discount for you guys. I don't get anything from it, but I wanted to make sure to mention that again in case you're interested in checking it out. And a shout out today to all my listeners in Oregon. If you're in Oregon, drop me a line, say hello, and let me know of any resources that are in your communities that I should know about that I can help share with others, especially if you're outside the Portland area. I don't actually have any resources right now listed outside the Portland metro area, so please do reach out. Speaking of resources, a few resources for you this week. I mentioned, I believe it was last time, that there is a new program from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is for funeral expense reimbursement, and this is for my U.S. listeners. Funeral expense reimbursement for families who have had someone die of COVID and had funeral expenses. They'll actually reimburse up to $9,000 of documented expenses. I'm going to put a direct link to the information in today's email and blog post. You can also go to FEMA's homepage, fema.gov, fema.gov. And if you scroll down, you can find it there as well. It basically, you apply by telephone, and there's all kinds of information on there about what documentation you need and how you qualify. and how to do that. So do check that out. And if that isn't relevant for you, please think about if there's somebody you know who might be able to take advantage of that option. Next, new episode this week from the Ask Lisa podcast. It just posted, I believe, yesterday. It's episode 36. It's called Helping Kids Manage Grief and Loss. I actually haven't had a chance to listen yet. I think it's going to be fantastic. I love Lisa's work. She was on the show back in episode 13, I believe it was. She just has so much wisdom to share, and her Ask Lisa podcast is terrific. It's all general parenting, not grief specific, but this week's episode is specifically about kids and grief. So have a listen to that and share it with anyone that you think might be interested in that as well. And one more resource, speaking of Oregon, this isn't just for people in Oregon, but the Dougy Center, which happens to be located in Portland, Oregon, has a terrific website with information for people, even if you're not in Oregon, including they have a brand new searchable directory of grief programs across the U.S., and actually there are some programs outside the U.S. as well. And you can put in your zip code if you're in the U.S. or else your location and find a directory of grief programs. So if you are thinking about looking for something and you're not sure where to start, that is a terrific resource as well. Their website is dougy.org, dougy.org, and I'll put that link in this week's blog post and email as well. If you're not getting my emails each week, be sure you sign up so you can get these links and links to the new episodes directly in your inbox, and you can sign up at my website, jennylisk.com. And finally, if you haven't picked up my new book yet, it's called Future Widow. Check it out. Speaking of the Dougy Center, Janet DeCristofaro from Dougy wrote the foreword to Future Widow. You may also know her because she hosts the Grief Out Loud podcast, which is a terrific podcast, which has been going for a number of years now. And it is on lots of different grief-related topics with terrific guests, so check that out. So she wrote the foreword anyway for Future Widow, and I just wanted to read you a snippet of that. She says, quote, "This book is one you never want to have to read. It's also the book everyone should read." So I'm so thrilled that she wrote the foreword and honored that she would contribute to my book in this way. And so you can read her whole foreword as well as the rest of the book, and check it out. It's at futurewidowbook.com. Futurewidowbook.com has links to all the stores: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound. If you want to get it from your local independent bookstore, they can order it for you. Also, it's available on many different e-readers: Kobo, Nook, Kindle, lots of other e-readers that are popular in different countries with different e-reader fans. So all the links for everything is on futurewidowbook.com. Okay, as always, thank you for listening, and until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.